Welcome everyone to episode 5 of the GogertZone podcast. This is your hosts here, Ryan Gogerty with our man C-Man Connor Calzone, hence the name of the podcast. If you've been watching us, you know why you're here. It's the GogertZone, Gogerty Calzone, your favorite food named ADHD oriented fantasy football podcast. Thank you for sticking around for an episode 5. I think we're kind of surprised we're here. We just get excited every time
Yeah,
that
you
subscribe number
thanking
goes up.
me or for staying around for 5 episodes, or the viewers for staying for 5 episodes?
I'm thinking both, man. I think it's a blessing that we've made it this far. Both of us have bounced around our ADHD, somehow improved our episodes a little bit every time, which is our main goal. We want to provide you guys with the best fantasy football content we can, statistically oriented, ADHD goofball related, and just help you win your fantasy league and have a fun time doing it. So thank you for joining us for episode 5. Connor, it's a pleasure being here with you today.
Pleasure being here with you too, Ryan. Got new headphones this time, so hopefully everything sounds good. My last headphones kind of did this, so hoping that everything still runs
I did
smoothly.
not know that happened since the
Yeah,
last time we
I
recorded.
think I
Damn.
just like spun around in my chair and like the ear was under like the arm of the chair and it just like snapped. I mean, literally neck snap.
Nice.
It was brutal, fatality. But everything's still running well. And I'm
Good.
excited for some wide receiver rankings. I did the running back rankings in last episode, episode 4. This time, good old Ryan Gogerty has made the wide receiver rankings.
That's a
So
former
now, when you have
lost
problem with his rankings, it's his fault, not mine.
my stupid fault, not yours. Yeah,
Stupid,
no,
stupid, stupid.
I am a washed up wide receiver. I played just in high school for a short stint in college as well. So I barely, touched the field when it came to advanced football, but I do know a little bit about the intricacies of the football, of the quarterback wide receiver dynamic there. I got my little Senior Bowl t-shirt on today. You might have noticed the new setup we got going
Yeah,
on
I
here.
see the love you mom behind you, little mama's boy.
This is Mama's desk. We got the Oklahoma blanket out and about. This is Mama Gog's work spot, or Sandy if you know her intimately. But comment love to Sandy Gogs in the chat if you're watching. Which we should start live streaming so people can actually do that. But anyways, I'm more than excited to get into this. I have some ranking differences from the consensus from the professionals today that you may just call blasphemous. It's quite over the top. But I'm very confident what I got to say about these guys. I tend to do half decent in my wide receiver analysis. We'll have a strategy episode later on that I think will really help you guys win your leagues. But my general take on the wide receivers are that if you don't get a guy that's towards the end of one of these tiers, don't take him. I think running back is one of those positions that gets off the board so quick. You need to take them early and often. And although some of these names we're going to be going over today are super exciting and just guys that totally set themselves apart from the rest of the league, sometimes it's a little bit too rich for my blood. So a lot of the context of today's conversation is going to be with at cost, how much value are you getting for the receivers? And so prefacing that, there's going to
Spoken
be a
like a
lot of hot
true
takes.
finance major there, Ryan.
Honestly, I was thinking about that. We should have mentioned that to our viewers a little bit more. We have some sort of statistical background, some projections under our belts, and I think we can put some math to this here and have ourselves a good projections. But tier one, going into tier one, let's kick it off here. I started off with the untouchables. I know a lot of people like to break it down to a top two, a top three for their tier ones. I'm saying none of these 5 guys stand out to me in a way that I could confidently say they're going to finish above the rest. I had the number one pick in a 16 team keeper league last year, and I did not take Justin Jefferson for this reason exactly. I knew that running backs would be so hard to come by in one of those massive leagues later on. And to be honest, the wide receiver output is so dependent on volume. It is so dependent on having a good quarterback that trusts you and gets the ball to you all the time, which is a theme we'll talk about a lot today. And all 5 of these guys had amazing volume last year, maybe with the exception of Jamar Chase having some troubles once Joe Burrow went out, but absolutely love these guys. And you may notice Justin Jefferson at the top of these rankings. So the untouchables going 1 through 5. I have Justin Jefferson, then CeeDee Lamb at 2, Tyreek Hill at 3, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4, and Jamar Chase at 5, who I do think is back in the untouchable conversation this year. But I have Jefferson leapfrogging up to number 1 over CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill. because we got some news this week that JJ McCarthy suffered the same fate one of our beautiful hosts did just a few short years ago with a meniscus tear. And
Any knee
Connor,
injury that's been suffered, I've suffered in the past as well. So,
and the first thing I did was reach out to you, Connor, and ask, why the fuck is he out for the year? It's just a meniscus.
yeah, I mean,
And
it
then,
depends on the type of meniscus tear, and it
right,
seems like it's a total meniscus tear, not just a medial one. Even if he, like, if this is a playoff team or he was trying to come back for a playoff game, maybe he'd be back 4 months from now. But why are they going to have JJ McCarthy play a meaningless game in December for the 5-12 Vikings?
right. And that's where we were. And I remember seeing some guys talk about there's the slight repair and then there's the full replacement, and that can be the difference between a 4 to 6 week recovery and a whole season. But I actually think this is some good news for Justin Jefferson, which is the main point I wanted to get to. Although I have been a Sam Darnold doubter since day one, because there were people ranking him above Baker Mayfield in the Baker Mayfield 2018 football draft,
He
that
did
I was
it!
like, this is
Yay! He
blasphemous.
mentioned Baker Mayfield.
5 for 5, gang. 5 for 5 and mentioning Baker Mayfield on the GogertZone podcast. But I never was a fan of Sam Darnold. But the one thing he did was move the ball downfield. I think he's turnover prone, but this is one of those things where this is a last chance for Sam Darnold to really earn himself a starting job. Even if he has a great season, he ends up getting traded away because the future's with JJ McCarthy. If he can put together a half decent season, he should still have a chance at a starting job in the NFL at the end of this year. And now that he has a full year to prove it, he's got Kevin McConnell calling the shots. I think he's got such a great coach that's going to coach him into being not a great fantasy quarterback for himself, but I think he's going to help the Vikings be more competent as a whole for the rest of fantasy, more so than JJ McCarthy would have been, even though JJ McCarthy may have been more of the winning type, which you might say. But that being said, I think Justin Jefferson is the best true wide receiver on this list. We're nitpicking here, but I have Justin Jefferson at number one. No problems with the rest of these guys on the list. If you end up with any of these five, you are already off to a good start in
So,
round one. What do you think?
something that you said yourself is that you're really looking to get guys at the end of these tiers. I don't see Justin Jefferson last year was a 1-1, consensus 1-1 in all of fantasy, not just the number one wide receiver, but the consensus 1-1. Now ESPN has him at wide receiver 5, which I would tend to lean more towards that than wide receiver 1. If Justin Jefferson is the 5th wide receiver off of the board, I'm completely okay taking him, but I'm not taking him over CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill. We had a 4 game sample size at the end of last season where Nick Mullins was the starting quarterback, and I don't think that there's that much of a talent gap between Nick Mullins and Sam Darnold, having watched both of them and watched Sam Darnold intimately on my television screen. Sam Darnold is not an elite quarterback, and yes, with those not elite quarterbacks, they are going to try to soak up targets to their wide receiver 1, and I think that is a realistic possibility. Last year, 4 game sample size, like I mentioned, post his injury and post the Kirk Cousins Achilles injury, he was a 20 point per game scorer for 4 games with Nick Mullins. I think that's about where he's going to be this year. 20 points per game. That's a very good wide receiver 1 in your lineup. But I think that CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill could be 22, 23 point per game guys, and they're going to have less dud weeks. Justin Jefferson is going to have those 6 point per game weeks, 7 point per game, 8 point per game weeks, when I don't really see CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill having those kind of weeks. So that's the reason that I think Justin Jefferson is a maybe wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, depending on where you rank him. I don't think he's going to be a wide receiver 1 in all of fantasy this year.
Interestingly enough, yeah, having him at 5 at Justin Jefferson with an ADP of 7.7 this year. That's a good point you bring up. The issue is that I see with the projections, they have CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill at about 23 points a game. Justin Jefferson was one of those guys averaging 24 with Kirk Cousins. I think he's in the same conversation. And frankly, this has a lot to do with that volume dependency. I don't think CeeDee's going to have a problem with the volume this year. I think Tyreek Hill might, because they changed that motion rule where you can't start your motions and then sprint into your route before the ball is snapped anymore. I think that might have a slight play on it. I think teams are going to hone in on Tyreek Hill a little bit more, especially with all this focus on him being the number one player in the league according to NFL Top 100, which is just absolutely absurd. We'll get to that at another time, but the fact that Patrick Holmes is number 4 just fucking blows my mind.
Yeah, unbelievable.
But I think more so than anything in this list, the thing to note is that CeeDee Lamb is going to be playing under a lot of scrutiny in Dallas because he's in that contract negotiation. I think they'll get it done before the season, but all this holding in thing, like not having, I think what's going to happen is he'll come back slightly underprepared at the beginning of the season, which does matter. It does matter. You do need to get back into game shape, and he's a professional. He'll be okay, but he has to slightly get into that. And I think Dak's due for regression. I don't think there's any way Dak can match as well as he did last year. Playing on a contract year, Dak is going to regress in my eyes just slightly. We're nitpicking here, but that's why I have
You
justified.
could say though as well, you know, Dak and CeeDee Lamb are both in contract negotiations right now. Pressure turns coal into diamonds, right? I mean, it could be a career year for both Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. I would be
I
pretty
love
confident in
pressure.
saying,
Pressure makes diamonds.
shut up. CeeDee Lamb, I could easily see as being the wide receiver one. I have more confidence in CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill as being the overall wide receiver one. And even though I would have higher expectations of Justice Evans being the wide receiver one overall than Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Mhm.
I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's range of outcomes is thinner, and I would still probably take Amon-Ra St. Brown over Justin Jefferson as well. I would probably be taking him at number 4.
I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's proven that he has that high floor. He will absolutely be reliable this year, which again is why all five of these guys are in the untouchables. You're not going to be upset taking any of them. Amon-Ra is the sure-handed guy for this Lions offense that has no reason to be any worse than it was last year. He's clearly proven he'll play through an oblique tear and do anything for his team. The only issue I have is that touchdown upside. I have a hard time believing that he's going to have the same end zone targets that some of these other guys will. But again, we're nitpicking. I'm never going to be upset here. Lions football for life. Love Amon-Ra St.
Lions
Brown.
football, let's go.
Not upset with any of these guys. These are my five untouchables, and I consider them all in very similar conversation.
Yeah, why don't we get into your league winners of tier 2?
Yeah, well, the league winners of past and future is the name of my tier two. And the reason for that is because there are some guys on this list that maybe have won you a league in the past and also potentially could be set up to win you your league in the future. There were a couple other guys I was considering adding to this list. There were guys like Chris Olave that struck me, Garrett Wilson. These were people that I was very happy putting in the conversation of league winners of the future. But when I got down to my final rankings, I just looked at their names next to these guys and I said, I can't say it. I can't put them above it. And I know I talked a lot about volume dependency today, but there are some guys on this list that I just am so happy with taking at the end of the first, not maybe not the end of the first round, but some of these guys towards the end of the first round, beginning of the second. These are guys that I am so happy having as my wide receiver one. And after seeing how last year played out for a lot of these guys that went in that second round wide receiver convo, and it didn't turn out well for them, I'm just not as comfortable having the Garrett Wilsons and Chris Olaves in the world. So, anyways, here's what I've got: 6 through 8 or 6 through 9. AJ Brown, Puka Nakua, DK Metcalf, and Mike Evans. These are guys that I am so happy seeing their names on my roster, regardless of how their quarterback play is. I think that AJ Brown's going to be the same dominant guy as he tapered off towards the end of last year, but started off just as dominant as he was the year before. I think the Eagles as a whole had this whole downswing towards the end of last year. I think they're angry and hungry this year. AJ Brown will return back to form. Puka Nakua, I had him in 3 leagues last year, two of them being keeper leagues. I know this guy absolutely intimately. Even with Cooper Cup on the field, he's a
Pause.
target monster. He's a touchdown monster. A little bit of an injury scare with Matthew Stafford there with a little hamstring. I'm the hamstring expert of the duo here, and I don't love that, but it is much.
Basically a physical therapy session. We could do a physical therapy podcast with the amount of injuries
We
we've
know
had.
all of the recovery exercises for every injury you could possibly have. But not a reason for concern at the quarterback position. So Puka Nakua, very strong at number 7 there. I have absolutely no problem with that. He's a sure-handed, tough, good run after the catch guy as you're going to see. DK Metcalf and Mike Evans. I mean, these guys are specimens in one way or another. There is so much talk about Mike Evans just keeping on defying the odds. I mean, I saw that he has never once in his career finished outside the top 25 at wide receiver.
He's
And
been 1,000 yards every single year of his career, if I'm not
every
mistaken,
single
right?
year in his career, he is a no doubter Hall of Famer. He's one of the only guys that's 6'5" left in the league at wide receiver. Just a touchdown monster. Baker Mayfield loves this guy, absolutely depends on him. He's going to keep feeding him the rock. and I'm very optimistic about him going into this year. He's a little bit higher. I have him than the rest of the ESPN rankings, but
Yeah.
my goodness, I'm happy about all four of these
I
guys.
don't mind the Mike Evans pick in tier two. Okay. Little siren outside. I don't mind the Mike Evans pick in tier two. I actually like it. The one problem I have with this year, AJ Brown number 6, I love it. I think he's going to be around that. I don't think you're expecting to be wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy just because the weapons on the Philly team, but he's not going to have too many stinker weeks and he's going to be a very reliable wide receiver 1 on your team. Puka Nakua, maybe Cooper Cup kind of steals some of those targets this year, but even so, Puka had like a 30% target share even when Cooper Cup was healthy. It's not like anyone besides Kyron Williams, Cooper Cup, and Puka Nakua are getting targets on that team anyway, so just give all three of them a 30% target share and we could be good to go. But DK Metcalf, I've owned DK Metcalf in several fantasy leagues, and he's always
Well, you don't
done
like him?
anything, but he's never made me happy. He's always disappointed me. He's
Oh,
obviously a
oh, come
physical
on.
specimen, but Geno Smith has not been able to consistently get him the ball despite his size. I mean, he's a freak in nature. He's super tall. He's super fast, but it's just it still feels that on 60% of weeks Tyler Lockett is outperforming him. I don't know if that's actually the stats back that up or if it's just what it looks like, but it always looks like Tyler Lockett is the wide receiver 1 on that team. JSN might be getting more targets on this team, and Geno Smith obviously he had the amazing 2022 season, but 2023 he did look like a shell of that 2022 form. So I
You
don't
know,
think I can trust DK Metcalf drafting him in the beginning or middle of the second round when there's still options, according to you, like Garrett Wilson left on the board. There's no way. I will never be drafting DK Metcalf in front of Garrett Wilson.
well, ESPN has Garrett Wilson going at number 7, and you will see where he's ranked in a second. But I don't have that confidence only because I don't know what Aaron Rodgers looks like. I have no problem with Garrett Wilson's talent. I have no problem with the volume upside. I think there's a lot of things to be excited about. And if Aaron Rodgers looks like he did in that preseason game last year, then fine, sure, put him at number 7. But we have to remember the last time we saw Aaron Rodgers healthy in a season, he went 9-8 and missed the playoffs and had a terrible season. And there's stats about Aaron Rodgers versus Baker Mayfield the last 5 years. And it was a blind comparison on a different show, not our show,
Shut
a different
up,
show.
dude.
And Aaron Rodgers has literally had a worse career since his last MVP season than Baker Mayfield. And I have no problem with that, but we have to remember he's 3 years older, a lot more ayahuasca in the system. And
That's only a
we
good thing.
don't know.
You ever taken
It might be
drugs
a good
before?
thing.
That's only a good
It
thing.
might be a good thing. He might be okay, but just that uncertainty doesn't make me more comfortable putting him up. And I think you discount DK Metcalf too much for two reasons. First off, Geno Smith had a better year last year than I think you remember. I know he looked really bad at certain points in the season, but he came around towards the end and actually made a better finish to his season and did look more and was reassuring to some of the experts that I've watched podcasts on that say he looked a lot like that season the year before when he was top 3 in the MVP running for part of the season. So I don't have a problem with Geno Smith here. I, interestingly enough, do agree with a lot of what you had to say about Tyler Lockett, not so much about
I, I,
Smith
I
and
do
Jigba.
just want to point out only missing one game last year, DK Metcalf was wide receiver 21 overall.
Right. Right. Well, so here's the thing. ESPN has him at 17. I'm putting him at 8. It's a big leap, but I have faith in it. I have faith in it in a lot of, and this is the main reason. The main reason is they have a new offensive coordinator. The guy who used to air it out at Washington from Michael Penix Jr. to Rome Odunze. And I have some faith here that they're going to air it out a little bit more this year than they're used
I
to.
don't I
And
don't
DK
think them
Metcalf
airing it
looks
out a
pretty
bunch was
good.
not I don't think that was the problem though. I mean, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, they did get plenty of touches last year. It's not like this was or they didn't get like an absurd amount of touches, what I mean to say. I mean, they did throw the ball a decent amount with Geno Smith. I don't think
Right.
that an increase of 3 or 5 passes a game is going to significantly increase DK Metcalf's value.
Well, this is my take. I have DK Metcalf 9 spots above where ESPN has him, and that's because I fundamentally believe that an offensive-minded head coach is going to lead them into a more offensive-minded team, and they will have a lot more motivation to be airing it out. And I think DK Metcalf's going to turn some heads. I'm happy making a board bet about this.
The one
If you'd
thing the
like.
one thing you could say is that this Seahawks team is objectively worse than it was in seasons past, and they'll be behind in games more often, and maybe that will make them throw the ball more.
Maybe you can say that. Maybe you can say that. But I think it's a complete
Board
unknown
bet
for
on
this
top
team.
10 wide receiver for DK Metcalf.
Board bet on top 10. I bet that DK Metcalf in PPR scoring will finish the season top 10 wide receiver on a points per game basis.
Points per game basis.
Well, that's usually what you do. We usually either say they either have to play 14 games. This is how the Fantasy Focus podcast does it. Shout out to them. We get a lot of inspiration from them. I don't want to get sued. They usually do 14 games if you're going to do the whole season, or a points per game basis to account for injury.
Let's do 14 game minimum then, because
Given that he plays 14 games, okay, I bet that DK Metcalf will be a top 10 fantasy performer in a points per game basis.
I think that DK Metcalf will not be a top 10 wide receiver on a 14 game basis total season. So put it on the board or whatever.
Put it on the board. Actually, funnily enough, we said that. Literally have a whiteboard here that we could have totally put that on.
Don't go putting that on the board.
My mom's office down here is pretty cute. It's kind of good vibe. We might have to deck it out in fantasy football here and move the office down here. But anyways,
let's get into tier 3. Let's start moving.
That's what I got to say about tier 2, league winners of the past and future. Let's go to tier 3, the bubble of a stacked wide receiver 1 group. This is one of the deepest wide receiver tiers, one of the deepest wide receiver years that we have seen. And that is why these guys in my tier 3 are still in that stacked wide receiver 1 group. Here you'll see Garrett Wilson. He's ESPN's number 7. I have him at number 10. It's not that drastic of a difference. I just think that uncertainty with Rodgers, we have to see how it plays out a little bit more. Stephon Diggs not getting nearly as much respect as I think he should be. And then you got Davante Adams. No one likes the Raiders this year. No one's, but I cannot get enough of Davante Adams. People hate on him so much. People think that the quarterback play, that might be the worst quarterback room in the league. Gardner Minshew is going to come out there and light it up. By the way, I do have Davante Adams lower than ESPN. ESPN has him at number 10. I have him at number 12. And but I think Gardner Minshew is going to go in there. He's going to light up another team. He's going to take that job from Aiden O'Connell. And Davante Adams is going to be Davante Adams, and he'll be a top 12, if not top 10 receiver this year once again. Rounding it out, Chris Olave. Chris Olave is one of those guys that I really would have loved to put in the league winners of the future, but I need to see more. I need to see more. I need to see more out of the Colts, and I need to see more out of Derek Carr this year. It's not a Chris Olave thing.
Ryan,
I need to see that they can do it enough.
Ryan, I love you, but I think that every single person in this tier is in the wrong tier. I don't think anyone in this tier should be in the right tier. Garrett Wilson is too low, objectively. I think that we are not expecting some huge drop-off in Aaron Rodgers' play next year, and even so, Garrett Wilson, at the end of last season, did pretty well with zero weapons, or with zero other weapons around him, and with a just atrocious quarterback behind him. Chris Olave is way too high. Chris Olave has never finished above wide receiver 16 in his career, and what has changed about this New Orleans Saints team? Derek Carr is still the same antique of a quarterback that he was last year. You think Alvin Kamara is going to have a good year, right? So he's probably going to score a decent amount of touchdowns. Taysom Hill is going to take a few rushing touchdowns away. Rashid Shaheed's going to get a few deep balls. How many more touchdowns are there to go around on this New Orleans Saints team? And couple that with the fact that Chris Olave has never stayed healthy for a whole season. He's already had some injury issues to start off this preseason. I don't see him playing 17 games. So Chris Olave at wide receiver 9 on ESPN, I'm staying away from that at all costs. I think Stephon Diggs is too high as well. We already saw him have a little bit of a breakdown on the sidelines in the Houston Texans preseason game. We don't know exactly what that was. Yeah, I mean, he's 30 years old and a multiple-time All-Pro. Why are you caring that much about a preseason game? But there is no clear alpha wide receiver.
Exactly the point.
No, there is no clear alpha wide receiver on this Houston Texans team. It could be Nico Collins. It could be Tank Dell. It could be Stephon Diggs.
I'm not buying it. They traded for Stephon Diggs. They had 2 great receivers. They had the Rookie of the Year, and they still traded for Stephon Diggs.
Because every NFL trade has always worked out. There's never been a single bad trade in the history of the NFL.
You know I'm not saying that every trade has always worked out, all right? Stephon Diggs has been a premier wide receiver in this league for years and years. He is going to show through again. And as much as I want to agree with you that they just have an abundance of talent, so the volume has to be distributed in Houston, Stephon Diggs is going to be the one to stick out. And it's not just that he's going to stick out by a margin. It's that I think the Texans are going to be such a powerful offense this year. There's going to be so much to go around. And I think a lot of people think that's granted. I think a lot of people don't appreciate years where Patrick Mahomes was getting 4 or 5 touchdowns every other game, and he threw 50 touchdowns that one year. You would look at the Chiefs wide, like Tyreek Hill, for example, that year, or Travis Kelsey, and you would look at them and we'd say, like, oh, they're one, they're two, whatever. Oh, well, who's going to be wide receiver two or three on that team? It didn't matter if you got it right because they would have twice as many fantasy points for their receivers as the next best team. Not that that's the case here, but you're talking about if they are a top five fantasy offense in Houston this year, which it's very realistic they could be, they might have twice as many wide receiver fantasy football points to go around than the Panthers or something like that. And what that means is that the Panthers wide receiver one might not compete with the Texans wide receiver three. It depends. But
That I can agree with, but
I'm
I don't
saying
think
that
that he's
Stephon Diggs is going. I think he is better than Tank Dell, who I absolutely love, and Nico Collins. And if he just inches them out in volume, which he should, I think he's going to be a wide receiver one. But that's why it's the bubble. It's the bubble of a stacked wide receiver one group. Wide receiver is very, very deep this year, but I think Stephon Diggs is going to show up. Your Chris Olave point, that's an interesting one because I didn't think you were going to say he's even lower than my ranking, going taking him from ESPN's ninth and ADP down to 13. I actually don't love him as much as I might have portrayed here, but the hype is so high on him. Everyone on ESPN thinks, and he did have 14.5 points per game last year. It's nothing to scoff at,
it's nothing
but
to
I think maybe
scoff
the
at,
hope.
but it's not like we're like praising him from the hills that he scored 14 points per game.
Right? But I think the hope is that he gets a little bit of improvement. Derek Carr gets another year in the system, and maybe we see him come around a little bit. But I actually have no problem with that. But bubble of a stacked wide receiver one group. A lot of hot takes, a lot of controversy. I'm really excited to see how it works out. But all of these guys are elite fantasy football players. You're going to be happy to have them on your roster. This is that kind of section that is it scares me because there's a little bit of unpredictability. But let's go on to tier four, where we're going to talk about guys that you're mostly going to be getting in the second and third rounds that are mostly wide receiver twos, but they have strong wide receiver one upside. These are guys that I see as reliable wide receiver twos, but they have some upside. And the young names on this list are these guys that could be league winners. And some of these older guys are ones who have proven they could do it in the past. And I'm interested to see if they stay down in this ranking as drafts happen more and more as the fantasy season comes upon us because there's a lot of old names in here. So going down the list, this is 14 to 22. We have Marvin Harrison Jr., Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, Devontae Smith, Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, and Keenan Allen. And you'll notice that those names are flooded with young talent and old established fantasy names. Marvin Harrison Jr., ESPN has him at number 11. Field Yates is so high on Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he wants to take him in the first round. I think it's kind of ridiculous. It's a little overblown. Not only are the expectations super high, of course he has a great volume opportunity there, and he should be the wide receiver one in Arizona.
On an
But to
improved Arizona team too.
but we need to look at these names on the list and say, are we really going to predict that a rookie is going to beat these guys out? We're talking about
No,
Cooper Kupp,
no.
Devontae Smith, Brandon Ayuk.
Marvin
I mean,
Harrison is definitely in the right tier here.
he's in the right tier here. I'm happy having him be. It would be not surprising if he finished as a top
Like
five wide receiver.
you said ESPN has him as wide receiver 11, taking him at the end of the second round, and I think that's about right though. To be honest, even though you have him at 14 here, I do think he's in the right tier. I would put guys like Chris Olave and probably Devontae Adams under him, so he ends up being about 11 on my wide receiver ranking as well. But when you're saying it, this is the tier that he's with: Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, T. Higgins. Those that seems like the right class of wide receivers to put
Right.
Marvin Harrison around.
And here is the second to third round where you want to start to make those strategic decisions. Are you going to be taking a tight end or a quarterback early? And if you're going to be taking a wide receiver, are you taking a gamble on a younger guy that you're hoping to pay off with the upside? Or are you looking at these older guys and saying they're being a little bit overlooked here? And one of the guys that I think is being overlooked the most, that I think will have a turnaround this year, is Cooper Kupp. I've already said I don't think he's going to do as well as Puka Nakua, but it wouldn't be surprised me if he did. If Cooper Kupp returned to form, I don't think he's going to finish wide receiver one again. But if he finished as a top five wide receiver, I would be like, that about adds up.
I mean,
Matthew
this
Stafford,
guy was a triple crown winner. What, 2, 3 years ago at most? I mean,
full MVP. And we're talking about writing him off. Again, another
when
victim
Cooper
of the
Cup
hamstring injury.
when Cooper Cup was healthy last year, I do believe he had like a 28% target share. So like this is it would not be surprising for Cooper Cup to get 10 targets a game and be averaging, I don't know, 16 to 18 points. next season.
And this is a Rams team 1 year further removed from that roster that everyone was considering so terrible because they gave all of their future away to make that Super Bowl run. We're looking at a roster that's getting slowly rebuilt more and more. Given Matthew Stafford's healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if Cooper Kupp finished as a wide receiver one this year. And some of these older guys, Debo Samuel, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, I love it. I mean, if you got a chance to watch DJ Moore sign that contract in Hard Knocks, I mean, you can see the faith that they have in him. The Bears are going to be a scary offense this year. I only partially believed that five-headed attack thing, and maybe I'm falling victim to the Hard Knocks hype here. But man, oh man, to pay DJ Moore the most money when he may actually be the least talented receiver of the three between him, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze, I think they're going to
I
feed
think I
DJ
think
Moore.
you can't say Rome Odunze is more talented than DJ Moore at this point in their careers.
You can't say it definitively, but people are saying
I
Rome
don't think
Odunze
you
is
can say it at all.
they're saying his acrobatic catches at camp are off the charts. And I didn't know this. Apparently, he was a track star as well. And he's 6'3", Roman
Sure. I
Dunze.
mean,
So
you can't just base someone off their acrobatic catches. Is George Pickens the best wide receiver in the
okay,
league then
cool.
at
This
that
is
point?
why I have him in my tier four and not Roma Dunze. I have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen ranked above him. But
Keenan
DJ
Allen is
Moore,
interesting at tier 4 there. You're high
no,
on
I have
Keenan
him
Allen
way
compared to
high.
the
ESPN,
ESPN.
he's going as number 31 for ESPN. I put him at 22. And I loved having him on my team last year. Very volume dependent position, which is why this might be a terrible take, but it also might be a great take. People forget how amazing Keenan Allen was last year. He makes so much separation. Wide receiver is one of those positions where speed is wonderful. But if you can have agility and specific moves that get you open going laterally, you can stay in the league forever. This is the type of thing that we saw with the Antonio Browns of the world. Of course, he was fast, but Antonio Brown's real
No,
expertise was his footwork. It was his
Keenan
footwork, and
Keenan
that was Keenan
Allen
Allen.
Keenan Allen will age well. No doubts about that. But
Mm.
I think, like you said, Keenan Allen wasn't catching 3 touchdowns a game. He wasn't going for 200 yards every game. It was a very, in PPR, it was a very volume dependent role. And I think that, he was kind of the only option in Los Angeles last
And
year.
that,
I'll get to my takes on Lad McConkey whenever we
yeah,
see him.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I
yeah.
think he is going to lose some value from that. I think that I would probably put him at the beginning of your next tier rather than in this tier with all these guys, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
It's a bit of a hot take, but personally, I love Keenan Allen. I think he's going to be that older vet that Caleb Williams really gets attracted to. I like Keenan Allen this year. I think it's going to be injury dependent, but that's my tier four. And again, very happy having these guys. But you have some boomer bust guys and some reliable old guys that'll be exciting to see on some new teams. So yeah, let's go on to tier five.
Let's do it.
Tier five, weekly starters in every league. This is all formats: PPR, half PPR, no PPR, or standard as we like to call it. 10 team, 12 team, even 16 team. These are guys that should be in every league, at least on your flex radar going into this year. And we have some blazing hot takes in this section. Michael Pittman Jr. being number one. We'll get to that, but let's go down the list. Michael Pittman Jr., Terry McLaurin, Drake London, Malik Neighbors, Christian Kirk, Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, yo boy Tank Dell and Nico Collins,
Too
and
low.
Zay Flowers going into his sophomore year with Baltimore. But let's get right to the meat of this. Michael Pittman Jr. going as ESPN's consensus ADP number 12, and I have him down here in tier 5 at number 23. Tell me what you think, or what you think is going to be my justification for why I have him down here.
I think your justification is going to be there's just too much. It's too heavy, run heavy of a scheme with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, and you
Mhm.
expect some regression from Michael Pittman as well. And I'm not sure I expect regression to this degree. Anthony Richardson, we obviously know him as the run first quarterback, but he does have a cannon of an arm too.
He does
And
have a great arm. He
Michael
does have a
Pittman
great.
will soak up a lot of targets. I think Michael Pittman belongs in that tier 4, the strong wide receiver 1 upside, even if he is on most nights a wide receiver 2. Obviously, I'm not putting him in the top 12. ESPN I think is a little bit too high on that, but I see him as a wide receiver 15 probably next year, a very very strong wide receiver 2. I think 23 or whatever you have, Matt, is quite low for him. Some other things in this tier though that I very much agree with actually. Drake London at 25. People are way overvaluing Drake London.
Yeah,
This guy has
yeah.
never finished above wide receiver 30 in his career. And all of a sudden we think just Kirk Cousins comes and he's going to be a stud. I mean, we haven't seen that in his career yet. We haven't seen amazing route running, blazing speed. if anything, I think that Kyle Pitts is probably going to benefit the most from the Kirk Cousins addition rather than Drake London. I don't see him as wide receiver 15 in ESPN. Um,
100%.
and Zay Flowers, too, you also had him under his ADP, and I very much agree with that as well. When Mark Andrews was healthy last year, I believe he was about wide receiver 37 or 38. Mark Andrews is going to be healthy going into next season. It's going to be a fairly run heavy scheme, even more run heavy than last year with Derrick Henry behind him, or next to him, depends what formation they're in, I guess. I do think that Zay Flowers is getting overdrafted at his ADP of 25. Those are the kind of underachievers in your rankings that I very much agree with in this tier 5. But let's hear your Michael Pittman reasoning and then your reasoning for those other guys as well.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, and I guess first I should say a lot of these young guys there's a lot to talk about with those types of things you just talked about. But Michael Pittman Jr. absolutely, it's one of those schemes that's run heavy. It's not necessarily that Anthony Richardson isn't capable of producing for a receiver in fantasy as well, but Anthony Richardson is a deep ball thrower. He's a power runner and a deep ball thrower. And we have guys on the Colts that are more of the deep ball threats, even though Pittman is clearly a wide receiver one there. Um, I think he'll have a very relevant fantasy season. I might have him a bit too low here, but it'll be really interesting to see. I don't think Pittman's going to put up the numbers. I think he gets too much credit for playing with Gardner Minshew, who is way better for a medium route runner, as from a fantasy perspective
That's fair.
than I think Anthony Richardson will be as a distributor. So I have him a little bit lower. I've had him on teams in the past. Totally great talent. He's big. He gets the job done. But going at number 12 was way too rich for my blood. And then I look for him next to guys like Terry McLaurin, and I'm like, this poor guy Terry has had 10 quarterbacks, 10 starting quarterbacks with the Washington, whatever the fuck you want to name them, and and now he has Jaden Daniels, who, if you got a chance to take a peek at him, not just in college, but in his preseason game as well, he looks sharp. And
He
I
does.
honestly, I'm very happy to say I think Jaden Daniels is going to be a better passer of the football than Anthony
and
Richardson
and
this
and
year.
and and how just how you mentioned how Jaden Daniels is looking so good. That's the exact reason I think Malik Neighbors is too high. Malik Neighbors is going to be going against better defenses than he did at the college level, and I think he's going to have a worse quarterback at the NFL level this year with Daniel Jones
I
than he
don't
did at the
100%
college
disagree.
level last year with Jaden Daniels. And on
I
top of
don't
that,
100% disagree with that.
he's going to be matched up against cornerback ones every single game because there is not a single other threat on the Giants. Sorry, you
No,
closeted Giants fan over
no,
there.
no, no. Hey, by the way, as a Giants fan, don't disagree. The only
So why do
gripe
you
I
have him
have
at 26? I think it's
The
too
only
high.
gripe I have with that, so ESPN has him at 24. I knocked him down two spots. I think Malik Neighbors is marginally more talented than Terry McLaurin. From everything we've heard, he may be the guy that sneaks up as the best rookie receiver in this class. It might come unexpected because everyone's expecting a
Next
lot out of
year or
Marvin
career?
Harrison this year. Maybe the career, we'll see. But
There's
what I've
no
seen,
way that Malik Neighbors finishes ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. next
first
year.
off, Malik Neighbors is faster. He's a better athlete as far as it comes to linear speed.
So
So he
Noah
might have
Lyles is the best wide receiver in the NFL?
All right, now you're doing the straw man. You're doing the straw man where you're bringing in all these. No, if he could play football, he'd score a million touchdowns. Well, he fucking wouldn't. And Noah Lyles should fucking show up and actually fucking play football, and then he would shut his fucking mouth. But anyways, that's not the point. Actually like Noah Lyles. I'm rooting for him. Sorry, I'm not saying that. I like you. I was rooting for you when you got that gold, unlike other people. But anyways, besides the point, Malik Neighbors, I think, is fast, so I think he has more big playability. I think Marvin Harrison is going to be a touchdown monster in the end zone, and he's going to be definitive wide receiver one. But Malik Neighbors is also going to be wide receiver one. Yes, a worse quarterback. But the Giants as a whole are going to be down a lot. That's my prediction. They're going to be throwing, I think, more than the Cardinals are going to be, but that's besides the point. I think Malik Neighbors has hands and speed that are going to be fantastic, and I don't think the gap is as big as it is. Now, Marvin Harrison, I do have a solid, 10 spots higher. Marvin Harrison, I have 14. Malik Neighbors, I have 26. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. 12 spots above him, but I'm saying the talent out of Malik Neighbors and the volume they may feed him with could have him much closer to the top of that than people expect. I'm really happy about seeing him. And I look at these names next to each other, and that's kind of how I make my comparisons. I look at them and I go, who is this receiver and their quarterback? And how do they fall in comparison? So Michael Pittman Jr. and Terry McLaurin, easy comparison. Both young quarterbacks that we think are very talented. but maybe Pittman slightly beats out McLaurin in the receiving talent, or at least the production side of things, or volume. But then you look at Malik Neighbors and you go, well, he might have a much worse quarterback, but he might have much more volume because there's not as much competition. So I'm happy with all these guys being in that conversation where they're always going to be in that flex wide receiver two conversation. I would be surprised if these guys are riding the bench by the end of the year. Last couple of people I want to talk about real quick. Christian Kirk, he might be a surprise. He might
I
really return to form on the Jags. Really excited to see him this year. Chris Godwin, I think, had a down year with the Bucks. Even though I'm not expecting the Bucks to actually have as good of an offense as they did last year, I don't expect that type of production. I think Chris Godwin was underutilized. I think the Buccaneers recognized that after going over the tapes in the offseason. And I think he's going to go back to that true slot position where he was a target monster, but he's also a little bit of a specimen for the slot position. And I think he'll get back on the touchdown wagon this year. I have him slightly above where ESPN does. Amari Cooper, no problem where he is, around 29-30. I think
Yeah.
that's a perfect spot for him.
These
And then
next
this is
two
where
guys are too low. There's no way. Your reasoning for Stephon Diggs being good is that this offense is going to be so good, and there's not that much of a margin. Just that there's so many carries and so many catches to go around. But then you're saying the Texans only have one top 29 receiver. You got
well,
Tank
there's
Dell at
some
30 and
context.
Nico Collins at 31. There's no
There's some
way
context.
that not one of those two guys is a top 25 wide receiver.
Well, this is the context. I would need to plant my stick in the ground and say one of them is going to be that. I cannot confidently say both of
So
them
you're
and
cheaping
maybe
out.
so here's the justification. ESPN has Nico Collins going as wide receiver 16 right now,
I
and
like
Tank
it.
Dell going as wide receiver 26.
Those are both right.
I'm purely going off of gut here as a former wide receiver. I
Oh,
think
you
Tank
played
Dell.
one. You didn't
I
play a snap in college.
hold the chirps for later, Mister Kneecap over here. All right, I think Tank Dell looks better. I think Tank Dell looks better than
Okay,
Nico
then put
Collins.
Tank Dell higher. One of them has
I
to be
do.
higher. One of them has
I
to be
have Tank
higher.
Dell. I have Tank Dell one spot higher than Nico
No, no,
Collins.
he's got to be higher in your rankings. There's no way
I
the
cannot.
Texans have one top 30 for all intensive purposes receiver next year.
I'm looking at the three Texans wide receivers right now, and I'm going, how can I be indecisive about wide receivers two and three and put either of them above Michael Pittman
Because
Jr., wide
you
receiver
got to
one
put
for the
some
Colts?
hair on your chest. It doesn't have to be over Mike Pittman Jr., but one of them's got to be 24 or something at
I'm not
least.
confident taking them above Malik Neighbors or Christian Kirk.
You
I
should be.
can't.
You should be confident taking him over Malik Neighbors.
No, no. Enough Malik
Oh,
Neighbors disrespect. I've already knocked him down, but you know what? He is honestly one of the best receivers to come out of the draft in a long time. I think this is a very strong wide receiver rookie class. But anyways, week 5, weekly starters in every league. Like, I think this is a decent list. Zay Flowers, he's one of those guys. I'm just like, he's not going to get any touchdowns this year. He's going
no.
to get a couple, but I see Zay Flowers as, unless they just feed him screens left and right, which gets old after a while, he'll be a decent receiver. He'll be in starting lineups, but I don't see him having that kind of top play upside. I
Yeah.
think, first round wide receivers, Baltimore is where they go to die. So
All right,
I think
I agree with you there. Let's start hustling into tier 6 here. We're falling behind a little bit, so let's just name these
well,
10 names off and let's get some stuff going.
the last three tiers 6, 7, and 8, all very jumbled. I think you'll see some names here that you'll be interested in, but like I said, these are the big name flex plays. Some guys that you'll recognize, and there might be some people that you think should be way higher, but they're the names that are just so unpredictable going into this year. But people are going to plug them into their flex position for week 1. And those are going from 33 to 42, we got Calvin Ridley, George Pickens, Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins, who's injured right now, Rome Odunze, I'm very excited about, Deontay Johnson, newly with the Panthers, Marquise Hollywood Brown, sitting out of Chiefs practice right now, Christian Watson for the Packers, Lad McConkey, and Jordan Addison, the speedster on and off the field. So we've got a list here of recognizable names. Hopefully, Lad McConkey you recognize
Come
after the
on,
first couple episodes we've done. Connor, thank you for putting us onto that take
let me
earlier
cook.
on
Let me cook. Let me cook.
early on in the offseason. But anyway, the main takeaway with these are that there are some names here that totally could be a top tier wide receiver too. I don't see many of these guys having a chance at the wide receiver as being a wide receiver one by the end here. But these are big names. Marquise Brown in the right position could take a big stride and be a massive fantasy output. But these are all guys that people are going to be overexcited about. I'm not super pumped to be taking, but I do expect them to see in flexes by the end of the season. What do you got to say about that, Connor?
Yeah, so I agree. I think that most of these guys are correctly labeled as flex plays. Sometimes you get an injury or some bye weeks, maybe we'll have to slide them up to the wide receiver 2. But most of these are flex plays, with exception for me to 3 of these players on this list. And I'm going to put them back on the screen so you can just see the 10 people that I'm talking about. The 3 people who I think will be wide receiver 2s are Lad McConkey, George Pickens, and and Christian Watson. Those are the 2 people who I think are going to be wide receiver 2s this year. I think that Lad McConkey is going to be a top 24 wide receiver in fantasy this year.
Hot take.
There are, and I'm willing to put that on the board, dude. I'm saying Lad McConkey is the only weapon. There's no one else on this Los Angeles Charger team from last year, pretty much except for Josh Palmer. And as I said on either episode 1 or 2, he sucks, and I'm willing to say that to his virtual face, not his real face, but to his virtual face, I'm willing to say that he sucks, right? Lad McConkey is a specimen. He was amazing in college. He's looking amazing. Look at that guy, dude. That's white boy summer right there. White boy summer. But he looks amazing in camp. He looks to have a really good rapport with Justin Herbert right now. I think he's going to be a top 24 wide receiver next year. George Pickens, I also could see as being a top 24 wide receiver. You actually knocked him down from ESPN ranking from 29 to 34. Again, Russell Wilson has had better last 2 seasons than people give him credit for. Obviously, because of the way things went in Denver, people have very low expectations on Russell Wilson, but I still think he's a good NFL quarterback, and him and Pat Freiermuth are really the only 2 offensive weapons in terms of receiving weapons on that team. And George Pickens, he has the big play ability. He has the deep ball ability. I think he meshes with Russell Wilson really well. I think he's going to be a wide receiver too. And Christian Watson is the guy I really expect to make the leap in this Green Bay Packers offense. One of these wide receivers for the Green Bay Packers has to be a star if this Packers team is going to be a playoff level team. And I think it's going to be Christian Watson. Jaden Reed kind of took that role for parts of last year. Romeo Doubs took that for parts of last year. Even Dontavion Wicks did. But it looks like Christian Watson's hamstring is healthy now. And if he's got a healthy hamstring and is playing 17 games, I see no way that he is not a wide receiver too. Yeah, knock on wood, I guess, for the hamstring health of Christian Watson.
Bro.
But
with hamstrings, we're rooting for him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm rooting for him too. And you know what? That's a good point. Starting with Christian Watson, I do think he has that kind of upside. I did knock him down 2 spots from where he's going in his ADP right now, but that's because no one knows what to do with the Packers wide receivers. Matt LaFleur's sick of everyone saying there needs to be wide receiver 1. And to be honest, it might be one of those offensive schemes where we can't predict who's going to be that guy on a weekly basis. But Christian Watson has proved that he can be top dog. I think he had a 4-touchdown game with Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago. Is that right? I mean, he's proven he can do it. Whatever it may be, he's proven he can do it. That hamstring, they do nag. Those hamstrings nag.
They do nag.
And I'm praying for him, and I think that he should have a good season. He's one of those guys, just because of that variability, because of the injury risk and how many guys there are competing for that position. I still have him down there, but it wouldn't be surprise me if he went way up there. Gotta mention this Lad McConkey take. Absolutely love it. Just got recommended a video on YouTube Shorts today showing Lad McConkey at Georgia just totally like double moving a guy, going upfield.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Physical specimen.
Just like spinning guys, juking him out, stopping, pretending he's going like totally. I'm on board with that. I would love to see him go off for the Chargers this year.
I wouldn't be surprised if he got, 200 targets this year. Like, that's how bad this Chargers team is besides him.
So it'll be interesting to see. He's a rookie, and we don't want to ever overdo it, but I do think he has some chance at that this year. So it'll be exciting to watch.
Not only will I put a top 24 bet on him, I would put on the board that he will finish above Malik Neighbors in fantasy this year.
Okay, well, you know what? That's disrespectful. But I'm not going to take a board bet on it because I want him to. I want Lad McConkey to be a top 24 wide receiver. I do think the Malik Neighbors take is disrespectful, but Lad McConkey, I am rooting for him. We do have him low. He's a rookie, but absolutely we'll be looking to get him in keeper leagues and things like that. So, yeah, and then the last 2 points on this list here, George Pickens, that's strictly an Arthur Smith thing. I love George Pickens. I love his quarterbacks this year. I'm really optimistic about the Steelers as a whole, but until I see Arthur Smith can get his head out of a bag, I'm gonna not be too
until he could put a square peg in a square hole. Not sure that. Yeah, that's a fair point there.
And then Tyler Lockett, we're both very optimistic about. I'm very happy to see. Like he just keeps producing. He's
He's just,
clearly a
he's just
target
he's just the
monster.
James Conner of wide receivers, where like he's never going to have the breakout game, but he's just going to be so consistent. He's just going to tough out a few catches every game, and he's never
But
going to
then
finish under
he still
9
has these
points per
two,
game.
3 touchdown night performances though, where he
Yeah,
just gets a couple drags in the
look,
back of the end zone.
I'm just, yeah. I mean, I'm not expecting that as my point, but he's always just going to
Right.
be so consistent, and he's going in the 11th round in ESPN. I'm picking him up in the 11th round 100 times out of 10.
Yeah,
You're
100%.
saying in like a guy who I can stash on my bench and I can be confident he can provide me flex level value every single week. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then the last 2 points I want to make here, Roma Dunze, I'm 8 spots higher than him, than he's going in ADP. That's strictly a talent thing. The Bears, I just think they're going to be better than everyone thinks as a whole, even though the world seems to be semi-optimistic as is. And yeah, Marquise Brown, just totally one of those guys. He could just turn into Tyreek Hill light for the Chiefs. So excited to see where this group goes. And we already said Jordan
Yep.
Addison speedster on and off the field. So let's
Let's get
let's
to
keep
tier
it
seven.
moving on
Yep.
the tier 7.
Late
Late season
season
bloomer.
bloomers.
This fit pretty well, actually. This tier I put together, and I saw a bunch of names in this 43 to 50 spot that remind me of people that might come around a couple weeks into the season. These might be guys that start on the bench somewhere, maybe sneak into a couple lineups here and there, but can totally turn it around and be league winners towards the end of the year. We're talking about people like Xavier Worthy, who may just actually come through and be the Chiefs' best receiver by the end of the year. Jaden Reed on the Packers might be that number one we don't know about yet. Rashee Rice, again, we'll see if his crimes continue on and off the field. But I'm suspecting a couple weeks
On the
suspension.
field.
He criminally underutilized on the field. No, but we'll see how it all works out. Mike Williams, hey, who knows? Maybe he'll be a blessing in disguise for your Jets there. But Cortland Sutton will be excited to see him back in action. See if the Broncos can do anything of fantasy relevance this year. Jamison Williams for the Lions, Jackson Smith and Jigba for the Seattle Seahawks, and Keon Coleman for the Bills. These are all names where I wouldn't be surprised if they started turning it around, but I don't expect it to start early on. I think these are all names that we're excited about, but no one's confident putting them in a wide receiver 2 slot going into week 1.
Yeah, it's something that's very curious to me as you have the Chiefs on the field speedster ahead of their off the field speedster.
Yes,
I think Xavier.
that is
I mean,
correct.
Rasheed Rice. We saw him almost put 1,000 yards on the board last season. We saw him
Yeah.
be the top option for a point where Travis Kelce looked to be falling off a little bit. We saw him be the number one option for Patrick Mahomes for a season, and he is the more prototypical wide receiver build. He's about 6'2", 200 pounds. When Xavier Worthy's 6'1" and weighs probably the same amount that I do. We're pretty much the same athlete, but I don't really see a world where Rasheed Rice is under Xavier Worthy. I've got to say that, and with this Marquise Brown hamstring injury, I believe it's a hamstring injury as well. I don't see a world that Marquise Brown is ahead of him either, because it looks like
Oh
Marquise
well,
Brown is going to miss 2 weeks or so of the season.
that's an interesting take. Marquise Brown, I actually have the most confidence in because I think he is the most complete receiver of the whole. Rasheed Rice is the best build as far as like a traditional wide receiver goes, but that's not what Patrick Mahomes likes. His best years as a pass thrower, as a thrower of the football, Patrick Mahomes
As
was
a
when he
ball
had
player.
as a ball player, were the years that he had 3 speedsters, and they could just interchange all 3 of them in all these schemes where they're just running across the field, and Patrick Mahomes could confuse the defense and then just throw a bomb to one of them at any given time. And I do have Xavier Worthy over Rasheed Rice, which is not what ESPN has Rasheed Rice 8 spots higher than Xavier Worthy right now. But I'm optimistic about Xavier, and he's one of those guys that I'm willing to take a gamble on as a rookie. And I think Rasheed Rice had that production last year out of necessity because I don't think they had other guys they could rely on. And I could totally see him falling into that Juju Smith-Schuster role from the first Super Bowl 2 years ago during the Super Bowl streak for the Chiefs. So, but either way, these are the guys that I think are fairly unpredictable going in, but happy to see with some upside later on in the year. Keon
I've
Coleman, keep an eye
Yeah,
on him.
I've got
Keep an eye
to.
on him.
There's no way that with how dominant and just superhero we have a player that Josh Allen is, that
He
their
needs to move
best ranked wide receiver is wide receiver 50. There's just
That's
no
right.
way, right?
He
And
needs
and
to
I
move.
understand you don't want to put that stake in anybody. You don't want to pick the wrong guy and look like an idiot for having some guy who finishes wide receiver 80 as wide receiver 30. But there's just no way
Right.
that Josh Allen does not have a top 50 wide receiver on his team.
I,
Could it be
I
Keon
100%
Coleman? Maybe. Could it be Khalil Shakir? Maybe. Could it be Curtis Samuel? I don't know. Could be any of the 3 of them. My
I'm,
pick
I'm happy
would
with
be
that. I'm
Keon
happy about
Coleman.
that taking the ground for Keon Coleman.
It would be Keon Coleman if I was to put a stake in the ground for anybody, but yeah, I understand that it's hard to figure out who's going to be that wide receiver one in Buffalo right now. And the last guy I mentioned, I don't think we have time to go over every single person in tier seven. Jameson Williams looks to kind of be on a revenge tour right now. It looks like in camp that the Lions are really, really high as Jameson Williams as a wide receiver two, because obviously we know Amon Ross St. Brown and Sam Laporta are target hogs. They're amazing players, but there's not really another weapon, and usually offenses can support 3 to 4 weapons. So if Jameson Williams can be that clear cut wide receiver two, he could definitely have flex level value on a week to week basis.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see it. He was one of those guys that was such a stud out of Bama. Just didn't get utilized because he had that injury coming in. And then last year, I think he had a
Suspension.
suspension.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah,
And
totally on board with that.
obviously, there's going to be touches to compete with Gibbs and Montgomery too. Not saying that Laporta and Amon Brown are the only good offensive players on the team, but I still think there is room for another player to carve out a role on that very good Lions offense.
So that is our tier seven late season bloomers. On to my tier eight sleepers everyone should roster. Let's go through this list. We got Curtis Samuel, Darnell Mooney, Brian Thomas Jr., Jerry Judy, newly on the Browns, Rashid Shaheed, the speedster from the Saints that everyone should know about, Romeo Dobbs, Jacoby Myers, Adam Thielen, Gabe Davis, and Khalil Shakir. These are guys that I think everyone should be willing to give a roster spot to towards the end of your drafts. These are guys that could end up winning you your league. These are the guys that might just sneak out a wide receiver one role, and you might not see it coming.
You are saying these are sleepers that everyone should roster. You want to see how I'm going with Darnell Mooney?
Nah, stop
Wide
it,
receiver
dude.
4 on the Chicago
Yeah.
Bears, we're saying is going to a sleeper that everybody should roster?
Hey, Darnell Mooney's on the Falcons now.
He's on the Falcons now?
He's on the Falcons now, man. Bro, we gotta do our research, man. Check this out. Darnell Mooney.
I had
Darnell
no
Mooney.
idea he was on the Falcons. I'm not even going to lie. I think I vaguely remember seeing that on ESPN, but
Dude,
like,
I put him in there for exactly for that reason because I was like, holy crap, this guy is going to be the only speedster on a Kirk Cousins offense. Now, I mean, I'm not going to like discount Drake London or anything like that, but
no, wait, what's that really
no.
fast dude they had? He's got like a crazy name.
Oh, I know the guy.
Olamide Zaccheaus? Is he still on the
Oh, dude.
Falcons?
Oh man, I wish that'd be so funny. But no, Darnell Mooney, he's only rostered in 58.9% of ESPN leagues right now. ADP 153. He's one of those guys that I'm so happy taking a dart throw on. Darnell Mooney, be on the lookout for him because he just might be a sneaky target hog in a Kirk Cousins led offense this year. And some of these other guys, Jerry Judy, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, these are guys that have talent. We know have talent that could totally come around. And if they get the volume, just totally could end up winning you your league, like the other Bills receivers here, Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir. Any of
Yeah.
these guys, you can take a if you can afford a dart throw on these guys, they have some
These
upside.
these are definitely dart throw guys, especially the one that I'm most excited about here. Besides these Bills wide receivers, I mean, I'm not as excited about these guys as I am Keon Coleman. Obviously, I'm most excited about Keon Coleman when it comes to this. But Brian Thomas Jr., I mean, he could very easily carve out a wide receiver 2 role on the Jaguars.
Yeah,
He could be a
no, yeah,
top 36 wide receiver in fantasy, be a consistent flex guy. I mean,
that's a really good
Trevor
point.
Lawrence has had kind of a revolving door of weapons. He's always had Evan Ingram, but we had that good year of Christian Kirk, and then Calvin Ridley kind of came over and tried to be a wide receiver one. Neither him or Kirk had a great 2023. I mean, there is
Bottom
room
line,
for another guy on this Jaguars team if they're going to
bottom
be
line,
good.
you have at least a top 10 talent-wise quarterback. I wouldn't say performance-wise, but I
Top
think
5 money
talent-wise,
quarterback,
yeah,
top
absolutely,
5 paid
money-wise, in
quarterback.
an offensive-minded system, an offensive-minded team, I totally could see that working out, and him just being one of those really solid wide receiver twos on the Jaguars, not wide receiver twos overall, but
Yeah.
but totally worth taking a dart throw on, and I'm excited to see how it goes out. So these are the sleepers that I think everyone should be willing to take a dart throw on. Some of these guys aren't in the top 60 at all. Some of these guys are higher up that I bumped down a little bit. But totally keep an eye on these guys because you're gonna need those people to swap in and out of your flex position, take out injured receivers when an injured, say you have your wide receiver two gets hurt. So keep an eye on these guys. But overall, these were our 8 tiers for the wide receivers this year. We had some hot takes, some grumbling over at the top five, but it's a very deep position this year, like we said, and it's one of those things where you can wait. You can wait and get some really good value at wide receiver this year. Focus on more like your running backs and tight ends earlier on, but you really can't go wrong. Wide receiver is as rich as it's ever been.
There is very deep value in the wide receiver things. And remember what Ryan said at the beginning of the episode. You want to try to target guys because a lot of time there are very segmented tiers of wide receivers more so than there are running backs. A lot of the times you don't mind taking the wide receiver 18 as much as the wide receiver 13, right? I mean, those guys are practically on the same playing field, but they could be going 12 spots differently from each other, right? So you really have to just be seeing how is your draft going, right? Are people going for running back heavy strategies, or are they going for zero RB strategies, right? If they're going for zero RB strategies, maybe you got to take these wide receivers a little bit earlier, and you can pound on some running backs later in the draft. But make sure you're getting value wherever it is in your draft, because your drafts are probably coming up next week as the time we're recording this video, and
Yeah,
it's something to be
that's
very,
why.
very aware of. We've gone over quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of where to target things in your draft. And
Yep.
next week we'll have the tight end episode to wrap it all up. If we have time, we could try to do a draft strategies video for those who have not drafted yet. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we're pretty much coming up to the fantasy football season, and I couldn't be more excited.
Dude, I'm so excited. And yeah, do this. You might not agree with our tiers from the positions we've done so far, but it does help to make your own tiers, gives you a feel for what you can do. And like we said, target the end of those tiers because that's where the value is going to be before there's a big drop off, at least in your own eyes. And good luck if you do have any drafts coming up early this week. It's getting to that time of the year, getting
I got
excited.
my first draft tomorrow.
Watch some Hard Knocks, buying some tickets for some games during the year, and good luck everyone, and so excited to see everyone in the next episode. And we hope you enjoyed. If you did actually end up staying all the way to the end of this long ADHD blabbering, thank you for coming to the GogertZone podcast, episode 5. We will see you in the next one.
Signing off. Peace, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.